slicked world of ancient Greece, a civilization known for philosophy, democracy, and statues that didn't believe in pants. But beneath the legends of Plato, Sparta, and golden temples lies a much harder truth. Because while ancient Greece gave us the roots of Western civilization, it also gave its average citizen a daily struggle you'd barely survive today. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Welcome to ancient Greece, where your day begins not with an alarm clock, but with the sun turning your house into a slow-cooking oven. Your home is a modest one, made of sun-dried mud bricks or rough stone, with small windows and no glass, just wooden shutters to keep out the goats and maybe some breeze if the gods are feeling generous. There's no insulation, no ceiling fan, and certainly no such thing as personal space, unless you count the corner where the family goat doesn't sleep. You rise early, not because you're disciplined, but because it's already too hot to stay horizontal. In the summer, the stone walls absorb heat like a sponge. And by sunrise, your little house is radiating it back into your bones. In winter, those same walls turn into a freezer and you're basically wrapped in a sheet, hopping not to become a statue of frostbite. You probably slept on a thin mat or a straw-stuffed mattress. No pillows, just a rolled-up cloak or maybe your arm. If you're lucky, the lice left you alone last night, but probably not. There's no running water, so your morning routine involves either walking to the public fountain or, if you're rural, hauling water from a nearby well. You carry it in clay jars balanced on your shoulders while silently praying you don't trip and shatter a week's worth of back pain on the ground. To get clean, you don't bathe in the morning. That's saved for the end of the day, if at all. You might splash your face, rub some olive oil on your skin, then scrape it off with a strittle, a curved metal blade. Think of it as a spa day, but without the spa, the day, or any real effect, and don't even think about privacy. Your family lives in the same room. You sleep together, eat together, and argue over who tracked mud in from the street. Because the street is also your hallway, your news feed, and your trash dump. You haven't even eaten yet, and already your back hurts. You're sweating and your tunic is sticking in places no tunic should. And this is the best part of your day. So you've survived the sweat box of a Greek bedroom. Time to fuel up, right? Welcome to breakfast in ancient Greece. A meal so minimal it makes modern intermittent fasting look like gluttony. Your first bite of the day. Barley bread. Stale, dense, and about as exciting as the dirt it was baked near. It's called maza. Made from ground barley mixed with water, shaped into flat cakes, and left to bake either on hot stones or in the ashes of last night's fire. Think ancient granola bar, but without sweetness, texture, or joy. You might dunk it in watered-down wine because, surprise, the water isn't always safe to drink. There's no filtration system, no boiling, no Bria pitcher in your clay pantry. So instead, everyone from kids to elders gets a cup Ofos mixed with water. Not for the buzz, but for survival. If you're wealthy, maybe you get a fig or two, some olives, or a smudge of goat cheese. But let's be honest, you're not wealthy. You're lucky if your bread isn't crawling with yesterday's flies and doesn't crack a tooth when you bite it. No coffee, no eggs, no fruit bowl, no honey unless you live near a decent beekeeper and know how to bribe them. And don't expect to sit and relax. Meals are fast. No chairs, no forks, and certainly no mindful eating. You chew, you nod, and you get back to work. Oh, and if you're a woman, you don't even eat with the men. In many households, women and children eat separately, often after the males are done. So not only is the food bad, you also get to wait your turn to be disappointed. The irony: ancient Greeks are the same people who gave us symposiums, banquets, and poetic odes to wine. But breakfast, that's not worth a line of verse. It's utilitarian, dry, often literally burnt, and yet you chew through it like a champion because it's the only thing standing between you and a full day of sun, labor, and arguing philosophers. Bon appetite. Just try not to crack a myrrh. Now that you've choked down your stale barley brick and a splash of wine water, it's time to freshen up. Or more accurately, fail to. Because in ancient Greece, hygiene wasn't so much about cleanliness as it was about ritual and oil. And soap, that's a fantasy reserved for future centuries. Your morning bath usually involves pouring cold water over your body at the public fountain or courtyard basin. Unless you're lucky enough to live near a bathhouse, which most people don't, there's no shampoo, no minty body wash, and no sponge unless you stole one from a sponge diver in the Aeon. Instead, you turn to olive oil. Yes, oil. You rub it into your skin, not to moisturize, but to collect the dirt and sweat. Then you scrape it off using a strittle, a curved bronze blade that leaves you less greasy but still a little questionable. Imagine slathering yourself in salad dressing and then shaving it off. That's your skincare routine. And if you think that sounds glamorous, just remember everyone else is doing it too, often in communal settings, naked loudly. Hygiene is social in ancient Greece. Privacy is not. Now let's talk teeth. There are no toothbrushes, no toothpaste. Maybe you rub your gums with crushed charcoal or rinse with vinegar if you're fancy, but mostly you chew on a twig and hope for the best. Dental hygiene is more about divine mercy than routine care. Body odor ubiquitous. Deodorant doesn't exist, but perfumes do for those who can afford them. So you might dab a little myrrh or rose oil on your neck right before walking 5 miles in sandals through the Athenian heat. The result? A uniquely Greek blend of musk, dust, and desperation. Laundry rare. Clothes are washed by beating them against stones in the river. If you're poor, your tunic probably hasn't seen water since last festival season. In short, hygiene in ancient Greece isn't about looking or smelling good. It's about appearing moderately less revolting than yesterday. The oil and scrape method helps, but only so much when you're sweating in a tunic under a sun that's trying to kill you. So yes, ancient Greece gave us democracy, philosophy, and architecture, but a decent shower still waiting. Now that you've oil scraped your way into a new day, it's time to get dressed. And spoiler alert, your ancient Greek wardrobe is minimal at best and comically impractical at worst. You've got two options, a kitten or a H-mation. Both basically oversized linen rectangles that you wrap and pin with a brooch or tie with a belt. It's not tailored, it's not fitted, and it absolutely wasn't designed with windy days in mind. One wrong breeze and suddenly your whole philosophical outlook is on display. Forget underwear, it's not a thing, and bras don't exist. So unless you're a Spartan woman trained to sprint and wrestle, you're just hopping your pins hold and no one notices your wardrobe shifting like a loose curtain. Now let's talk footwear. If you're lucky, you own a pair of leather sandals. If not, you're barefoot. And that means a full day of walking on sun-baked stone, goat-trodden dirt, and whatever the local market has squished into the roads. Imagine strolling across a skillet in July while dodging donkey dung. That's your daily commute. Of course, there's no sun protection, no hats unless you're a farmer or sailor, and no sunscreen because you live in 450 BCE. And science hasn't been invented yet. The Aeon sun. It doesn't care how philosophical you are. It will roast you. By noon, your shoulders are burned, your feet are filthy, and your linen robe has stuck to you in 4 places that defy geometry. And don't forget, public nudity isn't shocking in Greek society. You might pass men at the gymnasium training in the buff, or even politicians delivering speeches in togas that barely hold together. Now, if you're wealthy, your tunic might be dyed, maybe a soft purple or saffron yellow, but most people wear off-white or brown because dyes are expensive, and no one wants to waste good color on the guy who fixes fishnets for a living. So you walk through your day dressed like a toga burrito, sunburned, sweating, and hopping your pin doesn't pop loose in front of the priestess. And the worst part, you're only halfway through your chores. Welcome to ancient Greece, where military service isn't a job. It's your civic duty, your social expectation, and sometimes your one-way ticket to an early grave. If you're a free male citizen, especially in Athens or Sparta, congratulations. You're automatically a soldier, whether you like it or not. By your teens, you're already training with wooden weapons and learning formations in the phalanx. That famous Greek battle strategy that involves standing shoulder to shoulder behind large shields and hopping the guy next to you doesn't trip. In Sparta, boys start military training at age 7 in the brutal AOG system, a program that turns children into warriors by essentially starving, whipping, and isolating them until only the toughest remain. In Athens, things are gentler, but still mandatory. 2 years of training in your late teens followed by decades of being on call. You don't get to say, I'm more of a thinker. Even philosophers like Socrates fought in wars and not with witty comebacks with actual weapons. And there's always a war. Whether it's Sparta versus Athens, Athens versus Persia, Sparta versus literally everyone, or just a neighboring polis getting sassy about trade routes, conflict is a way of life. Peace is just the pause between two invasions. Armor. If you can afford it, you get a bronze helmet, breastplate, greaves, a round hop shield, and a spear. If you can't, well, try not to be in the front row. Leather and cloth don't stop arrows. The worst part, you supply your own gear. That's right. Being a soldier is a Bob situation. Bring your own bronze. Poorer citizens either beg, borrow, or fight lightly armed, which is Greek for more likely to die first. And when you're not fighting, you're preparing, training, cleaning weapons, arguing in the assembly about strategy, or rowing warships for hours as part of the Navy. Because yes, those triumphs don't paddle themselves. There's no veterans' health care, no pensions, no therapy, just scars, limps, and the occasional poorly carved gravestone praising your virtue and courage. If you think life as a man in ancient Greece sounds rough, just wait until you hear about being a woman. In most Greek city-states, especially Athens, women had fewer rights than a pile of decorative urns. You couldn't vote, couldn't hold office, couldn't own land outright, and rarely appeared in public without a male escort. In fact, if people saw you out too often, they might start whispering that you were a courtesan, or worse, a Spartan. Let's start with your daily routine. You wake up before sunrise to start the chores. You spin wool, weave cloth, grind grain, fetch water, bake bread, manage the slaves if your household has any, and raise the children. You're the household CEO, but one without pay, respect, or days off. Your social life limited. You don't attend plays. You don't join the philosophical debates. You're not at the gymnasium. That's for naked men only. You're confined mostly to the gyasum, the women's quarters, and your contact with the outside world consists of glimpses through laddies' work windows, education. If you're lucky, you might learn to read a bit, but mostly you're trained in domestic duties, philosophy, rhetoric, geometry. That's for the boys. Your job is to marry well, have sons, and stay invisible while doing it. Marriage happens young, often in your early teens, to a man twice your age, arranged by your father who treats you more like a trade agreement than a person. Love is optional. Dowries are mandatory, and when you do have children, your primary value becomes your womb. Now, Sparta was the exception. Spartan women were famously more liberated. They were educated, exercised in public, and could own property. But before you envy them too much, remember their freedom came from a state-sponsored obsession with warfare and eugenics. Your main job as a Spartan woman, give birth to strong warriors or face disgrace. And if your husband dies, you can't inherit much. You can't remarry without permission. And your options shrink faster than your social circle. You're stuck legally, socially, and often physically. So yes, the Greeks worshipped powerful goddesses Athena, Artemis, Hea, but real women. They were expected to stay quiet, stay home, and stay out of sight. Ancient Athens is hailed as the birthplace of democracy. And yes, technically that's true. But before you get too excited, let's be clear, you probably wouldn't qualify to participate. In fact, the majority of people living in Athens were completely excluded from the democratic process. To vote in the Athenian Ecclesia Assembly, you had to be male-born to Athenian parents, a citizen over 18. That means women, foreigners called metics, slaves, and children, who made up nearly 90% of the population, had no political voice whatsoever. That's not democracy for the people. That's democracy for a very specific club of sunburned men in sandals. If you met the criteria, though, you didn't just vote. You were expected to participate constantly. Laws were proposed, debated, and passed in huge assemblies of thousands of citizens. There were no career politicians. Every eligible man was part legislator, part jury member, and part overconfident amateur. You could even be randomly chosen to serve in powerful positions like running the treasury or serving on a jury through a lottery system, which sounds thrilling until you remember there were no qualifications. Your fishmonger might oversee military logistics one day. Your uncle, who still believes in sea monsters, might judge a murder trial tomorrow. And if someone got too powerful, too popular, or just annoyed people the wrong way, ostracism. Once a year, citizens could write a name on a broken piece of pottery and ostracan and vote to exile that person for 10 years. No trial, no defense, just go away, you're getting too famous. And yet, despite its flaws, Athenian democracy was revolutionary. It gave ordinary men a voice. Well, some ordinary men and laid the groundwork for future political systems. But make no mistake, it wasn't fair and it wasn't inclusive. If you were a woman, silenced. A foreign-born resident who paid taxes, silenced. A slave building the Parthenon, definitely silenced. A philosopher who asked too many questions, possibly executed. Democracy was born in ancient Greece. But if you'd shown up expecting equal rights and inclusive politics, you'd have been escorted out of the assembly and told to bring your own ostracan. In ancient Greece, slavery wasn't just accepted. It was expected. Even modest households had at least one slave. Not because the family was wealthy, but because slavery was so deeply woven into society that it felt as normal as sandals and sunburn. The idea that someone might not own another human being practically unthinkable. Slaves weren't a specific race or ethnicity. They came from conquered lands. Thrians, Ceans, Syrians, and even fellow Greeks from the wrong city-state at the wrong time. Some were born into slavery. Others were prisoners of war. A few were kidnapped and sold. It was a thriving, brutal market and business was always good. If you lived in Athens, your slave likely did everything. Cooked your meals, fetched your water, cleaned your home, cared for your children, carried your shopping, and stood silently during dinner. Some even handled business affairs or managed the household while the citizen owner lounged at the symposium, sipping diluted wine and debating abstract concepts like justice. Irony level maximum. In the silver mines of Lauron, slaves, including children, labored in horrifying conditions, crawling through narrow shafts in total darkness, inhaling toxic dust, and dying slowly for the sake of coins and civic pride. Some slaves were educated. They taught grammar and math, served as scribes, or even managed bank accounts. But make no mistake, they were still property. They could be beaten, branded, sold, or killed on a whim and had no legal rights. The few who earned freedom, called freedmen, were never truly free. They still owed loyalty to their former masters and were barred from citizenship. No voting, no land ownership, just the hope of a slightly better tomorrow. And unlike later slave systems, there was no widespread abolitionist movement. Philosophers like Aristotle, yes, that Aristotle, justified slavery as natural and necessary. According to him, some people were slaves by nature. Enlightening, isn't it? Ancient Greece gave us ethics, democracy, and philosophy, but all of it was built on the backs of people who were never allowed to speak, never allowed to vote, and never allowed to matter. And that's not a footnote. It's the foundation. Feeling unwell in ancient Greece. That's unfortunate because unless you live next door to Hippocrates himself, your health care plan includes some vague herbs, divine intervention, and a lot of wishful thinking. Let's start with the basics. There are no hospitals as we know them. If you're sick or injured, you stay home. Maybe a neighbor knows a thing or two about picuses. Maybe a relative remembers a prayer to Asclepius, the god of healing. Maybe your local temple has a snake you can pet for spiritual comfort. That's about it. The most famous Greek doctors were really a mix of herbalist, philosopher, and gambler. They believed in the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to them, illness was caused by an imbalance in these fluids. So if you had a fever, too much blood, time to drain it. Coughing, too much phlegm, try fasting. Melancholy, that's black bile. Maybe take a walk or stare at the sea dramatically. Most treatments were based on trial, error, and garlic. You might be given crushed poppy seeds. Good luck with that. Boiled figs or a compress made of vinegar and something someone scraped off a goat. Did it work sometimes? Did it hurt? Almost always. Surgery, rare, terrifying, and generally a last resort. Without anesthesia or antiseptics, even a simple cut could go septic and kill you. Tools included iron knives, bone saws, and prayers. Lots of prayers. And if you needed something amputated, Hope you brought a leather strap to bite down on. Midwives handled childbirth, which was dangerous even on the best days. Mortality rates for women and infants were tragically high. One bad birth, one stuck shoulder, one breech baby, and that was it. If you were wealthy, you might summon a traveling physician, someone with an actual scroll and some fancy oils. If you were poor, you relied on local knowledge, street remedies, and sheer resilience, or you simply didn't recover. But hey, at least they believed in rest, clean air, and a balanced diet. So there's that. Ancient Greek medicine gave us the Hippocratic Oath, but it also gave us treatments like drink boiled cabbage water. So yes, healthcare in ancient Greece, mostly herbs, hope, and hang on. In ancient Greece, theater wasn't just entertainment. It was a civic duty, a religious ritual, and sometimes a full-contact sport for the soul. Let's start with the good part. Theater was free for citizens. Assuming you weren't a woman, slave, or foreigner, in which case, good luck seeing anything. You'd file into an enormous open-air theater carved into a hillside, like the great theater of Dionysus in Athens, shoulder to shoulder with thousands of other sweaty citizens. And you'd be there all day. Seriously, all day. The Dionysia festival ran from dawn until night with back-to-back plays, tragedies, comedies, and sada plays. No intermission, no snacks, and certainly no bathroom breaks unless you counted a bush on the hillside. If you showed up late or acted out, you weren't just frowned at, you could be fined. The performances themselves wild. Tragedies were emotionally gutting. Murder, madness, war. Gods destroying families because of one bad decision made 3 generations ago. You didn't come to laugh, you came to weep in unison. Then came the comedies, which weren't exactly light-hearted family fare. These plays mocked politicians, philosophers, entire cities, and bodily functions with stunning precision. Imagine if Saturday Night Live and a college debate had a baby, then dressed it in a giant phallic costume and sent it on stage. Actors wore towering masks, platform shoes, and exaggerated costumes. All male, of course, even for women's roles. The chorus sang, danced, and shouted commentary like an ancient Greek version of Twitter, only louder and wearing tunics. And this wasn't passive viewing. The audience was loud. They booed, hissed through things, and argued mid-performance. Theater was democracy with stage lights. If the play offended you, you let them know. If it moved you, you shouted, wept, and maybe reevaluated your life. At the end of the festival, a jury voted on which playwright won. Imagine spending 3 days crying over Orestes only to find out some bawdy comedy with a talking pig god took the prize. That's ancient Greece for you. So yes, in the theater you were never just watching. You were participating and possibly throwing olives. So you've survived your tragic all-day theater binge. Now you wander into the agora, the bustling heart of the city, and stumble right into a man wearing a cloak, holding no shoes, and asking strangers, "What is justice?" Welcome to philosophy. It's everywhere and it's not optional. In ancient Greece, particularly in Athens, philosophy was the local sport, and the champions were names we now associate with world-changing ideas. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Back then, though, they were just eccentric men who talked a lot and made other people feel stupid. Take Socrates. The man made a career out of asking questions that led nowhere and dismantling people's confidence in their own opinions. You might be minding your own business, buying olives or petting a stray goat, and he'd appear. Do you believe in truth? I guess. What is truth? Cue 3 hours of mental spiral and a desire to move to Sparta. He never wrote anything down. His student Plato did that. But Socrates left a lasting impression, partly because Athens eventually executed him for being too annoying. Officially, it was corrupting the youth and not believing in the gods. But let's be honest, he probably just wouldn't stop asking questions during dinner. Philosophy wasn't a cozy academic hobby. It was loud, confrontational, and weirdly athletic. Debates happened in public spaces. They were spontaneous, intense, and often ended in hurt feelings or deep existential crises. No microphones, just voices, hands, and enough ego to fill the pathon. And if you thought you could just watch, think again. Philosophers loved drawing in random bystanders. You didn't walk past Plato's academy. You were absorbed into it. You said one thing slightly wrong and suddenly became the day's example of unexamined life. Even kids weren't safe. Aristotle tutored Alexander the Great, a teenager who later conquered half the known world. Imagine your high school civics teacher handing you a globe and saying, "Go fix this." So yes, philosophy gave us logic, ethics, science, and political theory. But in ancient Greece, it also gave you a headache, a crisis of identity, and a 70% chance of being publicly humiliated by a man in sandals. So you've made it in ancient Athens. You're well-spoken, clever, politically active. People like you maybe too much. That's your first mistake. Because in Athens, being too popular could get you kicked out of the city for 10 years. Not arrested, not fined, just gone. This wasn't a conspiracy or a backroom deal. It was built into the system. It was called ostracism, and it was perfectly legal, perfectly public, and perfectly terrifying. Once a year, the citizens of Athens would gather to decide whether to hold an ostracism vote. If enough people agreed, everyone wrote the name of a person they wanted exiled on a broken piece of pottery called an ostracon. If someone got 6,000 or more votes, they were banished. No trial, no explanation. Just pack your sandals and leave. You didn't have to be a criminal. In fact, most ostracized people had done nothing wrong except get too influential. Maybe you were a war hero, a persuasive speaker, or just had great hair. Whatever it was, your fellow citizens decided you were becoming a threat to democracy, and democracy voted to yeet you into temporary oblivion. And here's the twist. It wasn't permanent. Ostracism lasted 10 years, after which you could come back like nothing happened. Your property was untouched. Your citizenship remained. No grudges. Just a decade-long vacation you didn't ask for. Some famous Athenians were ostracized. Aristides the Just was so well-liked that someone allegedly voted against him just because they were sick of hearing how virtuous he was. Brutal. Even Theisticles, the military genius who saved Athens at the Battle of Salamis, got the boot once he got too cocky. Turns out gratitude has an expiration date. Ostracism was meant to protect Athens from tyrants, but it often punished success. So if you were ambitious, you had to walk a fine line. Be respected, but not too respected. Popular but not charismatic enough to worry people. Think of it like a reality show where the prize for winning too many fans is being exiled to the countryside with your dignity and olive oil stash. Athens gave birth to democracy, but it also invented cancel culture 2,500 years ahead of schedule. In ancient Greece, you didn't ask if you were going to die young. You just wondered how soon and how painfully. Life expectancy hovered around 30 to 35 years. And that was if you made it past infancy, which was no small feat. Roughly 1 in 3 children didn't survive childhood thanks to disease, poor nutrition, and the fact that hygiene was, as we've discussed, more theoretical than actual. You could die from anything. A scratch that turned septic, a fever no one could explain, childbirth, a leading cause of death for women, or something as simple as drinking the wrong cup of water. Medicine was limited and divine intervention wasn't known for consistency. If you lived in a city, disease spread fast. Cramped quarters, open-air sewers, and communal fountains made epidemics a regular part of life. The infamous plague of Athens during the Peloponnesian War wiped out a third of the city. Thucydides wrote about it, then he got it, then somehow survived. Most weren't so lucky. War constant. If you were a man, odds were you'd die holding a spear or rowing a try. Even if you weren't killed in battle, injuries often turned fatal days later. No antibiotics, no stitches, just hope and garlic compresses. And there was always the possibility of death by divine tantrum. Displease a god, forget a sacrifice. Mock a temple statue or speak ill of Zeus after 3 cups of wine, and you could find yourself on the wrong end of a lightning bolt, plague, or spontaneous goat stampede. Burial rites were important. If your family couldn't afford a proper funeral with coins for the ferrymen and rituals to secure your spot in the afterlife, you might be dumped outside the city walls, unmarked and forgotten. Not only was that tragic, it was spiritually dangerous. The Greeks believed unburied souls wandered eternally, caught between worlds. Death wasn't poetic, it was daily, and it didn't care about your philosophy, your beauty, or your lineage. You could be a slave, a general, or a poet and still die from a moldy fig or an angry mosquito. The Greeks had 12 Olympians and not a single one of them liked you. In theory, ancient Greek religion was all about harmony with the divine, worshipping Zeus, Hea, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Poseidon, and the rest of the golden crew up on Mount Olympus. In practice, it was constant spiritual damage control. These gods weren't peaceful, all-loving deities. They were divine drama queens with superpowers. Forget a sacrifice. They'd ruin your crops. Say the wrong prayer, your ship sinks. Step into the wrong grove. Snake bite, plague, famine, take your pick. The gods didn't just demand your loyalty. They demanded perfect timing, flawless rituals, and unblinking obedience. You didn't have weekly temple visits. You had daily rituals, home altars, seasonal festivals, and civic ceremonies. Before planting crops, pray to Data going to war. Offer to Ares, traveling by sea. You'd better pour out some wine to Poseidon and maybe throw in a goat just to be safe. Each god had favorites and grudges. Apollo might protect your city, unless your grandfather offended him once, in which case you're cursed until further notice. Hera was the goddess of marriage, but she also specialized in making mortal women's lives miserable, if Zeus so much as looked at them. Athena rewarded wisdom and also turned people into spiders. Casual. And if the Olympians weren't enough to keep you nervous, there were nymphs, satyrs, spirits, river gods, and monsters lurking around every corner. Step on the wrong patch of sacred land, and suddenly your left leg belongs to a vengeful woodland sprite. But worst of all, you never knew why something bad happened. Was it the wrong offering, the wrong timing? Did you insult a god in a dream? Maybe it was your cousin. Maybe it was something your great-grandfather did. Doesn't matter. The gods work in mysterious and deeply personal ways. And yet, for all the terror, Greek religion was woven into every part of life, from politics to childbirth to the Olympic Games. You feared the gods, yes, but you also depended on them. Their temples were city landmarks. Their festivals were national holidays. And their myths explained everything from lightning to love. You didn't believe in gods out of faith. You believed out of survival instinct. So after everything, the sun-baked homes, the barley-bread breakfasts, the sandal-blistered treads, the wars, plagues, gods, and goat-related traumas, let's ask the question plainly. Would you last a single day in ancient Greece? Honestly, no. You'd fold before lunch. The heat, the diet, the constant threat of war or divine punishment would wipe that Instagrammable toga fantasy right off your face. You're not used to hauling water before breakfast or squatting over a hole in the ground next to a temple goat. You'd miss your running water, your aspirin, and your right to complain without being exiled by pottery shard. You might love the idea of living among marble statues, brilliant philosophers, and epic poets. But guess what? Those were the 1% of ancient Greece. For everyone else, it was backbreaking labor, limited rights, and frequent funerals. Your democracy only if you're a male citizen.